For the first time, the new Pac-12 commissioner is going to speak. What's she going to say with Washington State's President Kirk Schulz?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth: realignment, coaching carousel, portal, and more. We've got it for you right here. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get yourself started. So George Kliavkoff was removed as the Pac-12 commissioner recently, and promoted is a longtime deputy in the Pac-12, Teresa Gould. And so she is going to speak with Washington State President Kirk Schulz today, that being Thursday, depending on when you're listening to or watching the show. And I am going to be, shall we say, dialed in to whatever those two end up discussing, because this is going to impact the realignment landscape. I have long held the belief, continue to hold the belief, the Pac-12 is setting up to rebuild itself to at least 8 teams in 2 years, meaning 6 teams will be on the move from some other conference, at least 6 in 2 years' time. And that move probably gets announced within the next year. That's the biggest thing you have to watch for here. That's the biggest thing to listen for in these comments, is any sort of indication as to where their heads are at as to how they want to rebuild the Pac-12, because that's the only way the conference can continue to thrive. Unless Gould just wants to be a figurehead like the kings and queens of England. You know, they're there and they technically have some authority and whatnot, but they're not actually, policy makers or decision makers or whatnot. They're not elected officials. They're just, kind of figureheads. Unless she wants to be that for a couple of years, realignment's going to be in the cards. And so Washington State President Kirk Schulz, who is a name that a lot of people have come to know at this point in time on account of he was holding up the 5+7 vote and wanted to ensure guarantees for the Pac-2 and wants them to be considered a power conference. And, that can't really happen because too many teams have left the league. You'd have to have an ACC implosion, Cal and Stanford come back. But even then, that just doesn't feel like it's in the cards for the Pac anymore. But so their realignment moves can go in a lot of different directions. And I'm curious, hey, she might not talk about it at all. She might look at this situation and say, no, we're going to stand pat. And that might not be the worst thing in the world, because there are a lot of dominoes that have to fall here, a lot of them. And so if you're the Pac-12, Pac-2, watching on at this point in time, trying to figure out how you navigate this incredibly complex puzzle that is realignment, well, you can't solve the equation until you have all the variables. They might wait until Florida State makes a move in the ACC or doesn't make a move, because if that triggers a downfall of that conference potentially, if more schools were to decide to jump in, well, suddenly you might have opportunities to bring in schools that are all the way on the East Coast and create a cross-coastal conference, the CCC, if you will. Just an idea. But if that doesn't happen, if just Florida State leaves and everybody else stays put, or if only 2 schools but the ACC remains in place, or if Florida State isn't able to leave at all, though I suspect they'll find a way to do so because they really, 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 really want to, then you know what your situation is out west. And so for Oregon State and Washington State, I don't know what you can say here to give your fans the assurances they're looking for, unless they want to go on the full-blown offensive, which would be the opposite of what I just alluded to, which I think could make sense. But I also could see the angle of, hey, we want to send a very clear projection that we want to build the premier Group of 5 conference in all of college football. As I'll talk about later on today's show, there are going to continue to be assurances that the Group of 5 will get a team into the playoff. Well, if that's the case, then every school in the country is going to find the best way, or try to find the best way possible, to get into that playoff, to have access to it, to have a guaranteed opportunity should you win games X, Y, and Z, and maybe, a couple alphabet letters before that as well. So I think there is real value in that, of taking some out of the American, maybe even poking around in the Sun Belt, obviously poking around in the Mountain West as well, which can get complicated. So this is the other thing that we got to be looking for in this particular statement. And in the whole news conference and what they're asked about and such, how they respond to questions, which I presume will be asked, I hope will be asked. I'm not going to be someone who's in the room for this news conference. I would like to be, but alas, here we are. This is a situation in which the Mountain West has worked guarantees that I'll lay out in just a second in their contract with the scheduling arrangement so that Oregon State and Washington State are disincentivized to bring schools over from the Mountain West. But that's the most logical place to look first, not only, but first, to rebuild the Pac-12 and get it to at least 8 teams by the 2026 football season, which is what they have to do. And as I talked about on yesterday's show with respect to UMass joining the MAC and becoming a part of our weekly Tuesday and Wednesday night MACtion in the college football season, you got to be in a conference right now if you're not Notre Dame. They're the only ones that can really survive there. I mean, UConn is still hanging out there. I'd be surprised if the Big 12 doesn't pick them up at some point in time because the Big 12 loves basketball and UConn's very good. UConn is very, very, very good. So as it pertains to the Mountain West, if this topic comes up, a couple things that you should know. First of all, the scheduling arrangement is locked in for 2024. It's expected to get locked in as well for 2025 for football, right? Oregon State, Washington State, every other sport in the WCC, that's all set in stone. The football arrangement hasn't technically been set. The Mountain West football schedule also comes out at, I think, 1 p.m. Mountain Time on Thursday. So a couple of interesting things perhaps there, but not on the realignment front specifically. If Oregon State and Washington State, the Pac-2, want to go out and add teams from the Mountain West, it will cost money. They have a war chest of over $200 million that they got as a departing settlement from the 10 schools that left them behind in the realignment carousel. And so as they would try to add more teams from the Mountain West, it would get more expensive. Exit fees and clauses in the contract that don't just run for the 2 years, but also run for the 2 years after that, unless the league were to dissolve. And so it requires a vote of 9 out of 12 members in the Mountain West to dissolve the conference. So Oregon State and Washington State, in order to get the best teams in the Mountain West, would not have to take everybody. They could take 9, and then go get 3 teams from the American and call it good. That'd be the best Group of 5 conference in the country. You would certainly add Tulane. You would certainly add, okay, that's a different conversation. Everyone knows you would add Tulane. Memphis would probably be a consideration. South Florida maybe, UTSA perhaps, but regardless, with respect to the Mountain West Conference, they have tried to ensure that they are either going to be well compensated should schools decide to leave and go join the Pac-12 and help to rebuild it, or just initiate a reverse merger and just, hey, take everybody along. It's logical from the Mountain West standpoint, but they were never going to be able to do everything they can to completely stop a move in which the top 4 in the Mountain West say, we're going to go over here. We want to be with Oregon State and Washington State playing under the Pac-12 banner. Because even though there are stiff penalties for that could run into the high tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, Oregon State and Washington State have enough to cover that. They can do whatever they want with that money that they got from the 10 departing schools. And if this situation comes to pass, their top priority for those funds, it's going to be rebuilding the league. So I have no doubt that would happen. And I'm most interested to see what Teresa Gould says in her first news conference as Pac-12 commissioner, and Washington State President Kirk Schulz will be there as well. They'll be moving forward in a world that's got an expanded college football playoff of at least 12 teams, maybe more. Can we stop this? Please. Maybe, but probably not. You should never stop going to eBay Motors, though. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. It's never going to stop, is it? It's never going to. At what point? Here's what I'm looking for in the college football playoff expansion. We haven't even had the 12-team playoff yet. That's going to be for the next 2 years. We're already discussing a 14 or 16-team playoff. Who's going to be the first person in legitimate authority and influence in college football to say, we should really look at the FCS model and go for a 24-team playoff? You know what? If you're going to have 24, you should really just widen it to 32. You know what? Like, when does it end? Where does it end? How does it end? I don't know the answers to those questions. Here's what I do know. Brett McMurphy and a couple others reporting that a proposal for the college football playoff expansion starting in 2026 would have automatic bids. I don't even like saying that term. It repulses me to my core as a college football fan. Automatic bids. See, it's just terrible. That would look something like this. 3 from the Big Ten. 3 from the SEC. Let's just, before we get to the rest of the numbers, can we talk about the insanity of that and what that is doing to the sport that we all love so dearly? Because this is absolute insanity. You're telling me there's going to be an automatic berth to the college football playoff for a team that doesn't even make a conference championship game? I know that these are loaded conferences, but at that point, get rid of the conference championship games. I mean, what's the point? You almost don't want to play in that game. You could ding your resume further. Sure, you could bolster it. You could get the buys. I understand that is there. But to not have a need, to not have a desire to play in a conference championship game, what are we doing? What are we doing? 3 Big Ten, 3 SEC. The proposal goes on to have 2 automatic bids for the Big 12 and the ACC. That, at least in those leagues, gives you a strong incentive, desire, need, and urgency to make a conference championship game. Because in what situation in a post-divisions world of college football, a rare change that's taken place in the sport recently that I'm a big fan of and I think does a lot of good, but of course automatic bids are just divisions but on a broader scale, but nobody seems to realize that and nobody seems to care. It's like that scene in, I think it's a Jurassic Park movie, look, I've got so-and-so. See, nobody cares. So 2 in the Big 12, 2 in the ACC. I can't see a world in which a team outside of the conference championship game is going to get that automatic berth. Like you would lose an extra game in the conference title game, whoever the runner-up ends up being, but then you would be able to hold over the head of the other team. You could come up with a specific scenario. I'm sure the YouTube comments will do that. People do that sort of stuff all the time. Some of you have got a lot of free time to comment. You know what? I'm here for it. I like the engagement and such. But 2 in the Big 12, 2 in the ACC, and then 1 from the group of 5. Tying back to the Pac-12, which I led the show with today. 1 group of 5, always going to get in. And then 3 at-large spots. Why don't we just call those SEC and Big Ten spots? Because if the conferences were to agree to a structure in which they freely admit what we all know to be true, which is, the Big Ten, the SEC are better than everybody else. Who do you think is going to get all the at-large spots? I mean, you could have 9 of 14 teams from the Big Ten and the SEC. Does that sound like a playoff structure you want? Maybe to you it does. To me, I'm not on board with any of these sorts of things. I am not a fan of automatic bids for anybody. ever. Because here's why college football has always been great. The regular season product has been, for a long time, for the most part, a double elimination, season-long postseason. It's a regular postseason. That's what it's been. It's been a regular postseason because once you lose your second game, whether in the BCS, there are a couple exceptions, but a 2-loss team never made the college football playoff, you're done. You're done. You're not getting in. And there's no other sport in the world, certainly not the NFL, nor anything else. The NFL is, of course, the closest, but guess what? It's not the same. I enjoy watching Sunday night or Monday night football or NFL games throughout the day and watching Mahomes go against Josh Allen or the 49ers play the Ravens or somebody like that in a big game. It's entertaining. Afterwards, when one team loses, you know what we're all feeling? Well, they're both making the playoffs, so I guess we'll just see if it matters in the playoffs. That's a completely different feeling. And the 12-team playoff minimizes that, does not reduce it down to nothing compared to the NFL, but a 14-team playoff, it's just getting worse. It's not getting better. This is just getting worse. So to create a structure in which you're freely admitting, yeah, these two conferences combined are going to get more automatic berths than the rest of the country, than everybody else, you are further incentivizing a mindset and a mentality that can grow and fester into an idea. Like when you watch Inception, can you plant an idea in someone's mind? Well, they showed that you can. And so you plant the idea of, we're just better than everybody else. We don't need everybody else. These games, we're above them. They're beneath us. We're the superior conference. Maybe we should just do our own thing. Has that thought ever crossed your mind? Because it sure as heck has crossed mine. That the Big Ten and the SEC might one day decide, we're just going to do this ourselves. We're just going to go off and make our own playoff and, call that the national championship because it's the best conference anyway. I don't know what their interest is. I don't know what their incentive structure is to continue to bring along the other leagues. I don't know where that exists. I don't know how that lines up. And so 3 Big Ten, 3 SEC, 2 Big 12, 2 ACC, a group of 5, and then 3 at-large spots, which will overwhelmingly go to the Big Ten and the SEC. You're just continuing to foster a structure in which the Power 2 break away. And for anybody and everybody out there that loves expansion and realignment, this is the product that it's going to give you. I'm still going to like it. It's still going to be great. It's not going to be the same. It is not going to be the same. It's not going to be anywhere close to what it used to be. I mean, a 3-bid automatically league, I didn't phrase that very well. A league that is guaranteed 3 bids to a 14-team playoff, that's going to be 9-3 Central. 10-2, 9-3. Heck, I can't wait for everybody who says they love expansion and they love more games and more games matter and blah, 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 and all that nonsense. I can't wait for those people to engage in the debate about an 8-4 SEC or Big Ten team making the college football playoff once you get to, the 16 or 24 team model. I don't know how any of this ends. This is my objection. It's been my objection to expansion the whole time. Like if you're just going to expand the playoff beyond 4 and you're going to go to a double-digit number, I would have been okay with 6. I think 6 is arguably the sweet spot. But I'm going back to the BCS before I'm supporting anything over that particular number. And we're going 14, we're going 16. How does it end? With the money that's involved, with the incentive structure in college sports, just ask yourself this question. Where does playoff expansion end? Why does it end? And how does it end? I don't know. You probably don't either. I know we still have something else to talk about today because there's another thing in college football that needs to change. And a change is being proposed. And guess what? It's the facepalm emoji. Today's episode of Locked On College Football First is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Just go bet against the Blazers. They didn't win the entire month of February. Bet against the Pistons or the Hornets or anybody else who's bad. If that bet wins and you put $5 or more down, you get $150 in bonus bets. Pretty sweet deal. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. They've got conference title odds, national championship odds, Heisman odds, everything you could need to get your college football gambling fix as well. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So, you ever hear the expression, drinking out of a fire hose? That's what's happening with regards to all the changes in college football right now. Because they're not just looking at changing the playoff or dismantling the NCAA with legal cases or this. No, they're looking at National Signing Day too. So National Signing Day has currently got 2 days, which, yes, that is indeed inherently illogical, weird, and strange, and doesn't benefit anybody or anything in the sport. There are discussions ongoing at the highest levels with the decision makers who have done such a great job with this sport to this point about adding a third national signing window. I don't even know how to react to this stuff sometimes because it's like sensory overload in my brain where I hear the idea and I go, so right now, you've got the early signing window where about 90% or more of recruiting happens in college football and commits, end up signing on that particular day and classes get defined and sometimes guys flip and everything like that. So when you look at what they've currently got, they added that signing window. I don't know why. The National Signing Day in early February, that's basically been reduced to rubble. I mean, it doesn't have that much juice because there aren't that many players. There's nobody left. And so now they're thinking about adding a third signing window here. So putting signing day, this is according to Greg Sankey, who was talking to Yahoo Sports, quote, putting signing day in the middle of December with playoff games no longer works. Fact check true. Move it to early December, the Wednesday before championship games. Oh, brother. Greg Sankey is a smart guy. Greg Sankey has run the most successful conference in college football for quite a while, and he's pulled away with his league from everybody else, except for now the Big Ten, and still, I think you'd look at the SEC and say they've got a deeper lineup of teams, but the Big Ten certainly is in that discussion with the 4 schools that they have added. This is the right thought, like when a student on a math test starts responding the right way and the teacher's grading it and he goes, good. The student has correctly identified the problem and begins working through. Well, that's not the right solution. Having coaches be required to put together a signing class as they're preparing for bowl games, which is part of the college football season, or now the expanded playoff, is utter insanity. Who does this help? I'm unclear as to who this helps. At the same time, coaches have to deal with transfer portal departures because the transfer portal opens during that time as well, finishing off their signing class for the impending cycle, and preparing for a game that is possibly one that could lead to a national championship season. That's I mean, why would you put that on a coach's plate? And here's the other thing. Since all of these decisions are all being made about television and money and whatnot, I'll just look at it from that particular angle. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to have anything about roster management to take place during the season. That does not does not compute. And so when you look at, what it does from an attention standpoint on shows like this or Josh Pates or Joel Klatz or whatever college football shows you listen to or watch out there, I thank you very much for making this one of those, by the way. I just look at it and say, okay, you've got a whole long offseason. You have got all the time in the world to allow for a natural progression of season is still ongoing, season ends, national season ends with a national championship in early January, and then you have a gap until spring football begins. So if you want to maximize the attention and therefore the number of eyeballs and the revenue that comes into your sport as a result of all that attention, you should have the opportunity to look at every component of that at a time when nothing else is happening. There's no logic to it, and you're working these coaches to death. And I know they're well paid and everything, but you can't possibly. I cannot imagine how a coach would want to be simultaneously scouting and preparing for an opponent, and then also having to recruit someone that isn't going to step foot on your campus in pads until March in almost every case. A couple guys might, be on the sideline in pads for a bowl game and whatnot. But again, the bulk of that recruiting class that will sign will show up in March. Why in the world does this all have to take place in December? So just from that angle, from a media and attention and financial angle, doesn't make sense. But then from a football standpoint, how are you supposed to build cohesion on a team? How are you supposed to operate as a functioning entity? It's amazing at some level that they do, because to have guys leave while the season is ongoing, in the rare instances in which that happens in professional sports, it is frowned upon. It is looked upon poorly. It's seen as that guy sat out games. Someone like, James Harden or a Ben Simmons or somebody like that who, just decided, no, I'm not going to play here. That's not good for the sport. But it happens in droves in college football with a transfer portal. So the time from when the season ends in early to mid-January to when spring football begins, that is when recruiting should take place. I'm not saying every single day. You can work in a dead period. You can work in rules and all that sort of stuff. But to say that the portal and recruiting are logical in any way, shape, or form, and then the solution they're coming up with is, well, what if we had a signing day in June? Who's going to sign in June? Who's signing anytime before the season? Who wants to sign in early December? Those kids might still be playing high school football. Let them finish their seasons. Let them enjoy their seasons. Just stop thinking about the next step all the time. Where's a kid going to go to college and just, overshadow what he's doing in high school? And where's a kid going to go, in the transfer portal? Or where's a kid going to sign? Or where's a kid going to flip? Appreciate things one at a time. You've got the season from the end of August to early December to now mid and end of December will be college football playoff games. It'll end in early January. Then full press and recruiting. Then you've got signing day. Then you take your break. Maybe that's when you want the transfer portal to open up. Or maybe the transfer portal doesn't open up until the spring. And then spring football comes around, which, varies depending on where you are. And then you look at spring football, assess the roster, think about it all season long, come back and do the same cycle. It's all jam-packed into December. I don't understand it. And I appreciate that they're looking at the early signing day and say, well, you can't do it right in the middle of everything. I don't think the solution is to have it in early December. Push it out. Have it be after the season. That's what I would do. But when do I ever get my way? Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.